Okay, see if I can.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. We have Lubna Ali, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of Texas. She holds a master's degree in marriage and family therapy from Northwestern University at the Family Institute in Illinois. She's done a lot of work in our own community, mashallah. She's worked with a lot of our clients and has done a couple of these lectures, which I really find it quite a bit of learning for my own self in terms of couple therapy and picking up things that I can kind of reiterate to myself. And in fact, Lubna, we've had events where I go to and my friends are really kind of discussing all the things you're talking about. So thank you very much for giving all this time to this workshop. We really appreciate it. With that, we're going to talk about the impacts of resentment on a relationship with 9 resentment busting strategies. So thank you, Lubna. I'll let you take over, and I'm going to mute myself. And inshallah, at the end, we can have questions or things we can talk about.
Okay, sounds good. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm so glad that you guys are here. Welcome to our seminar today. The topic today is going to be the impact of resentment on relationships. So as Afsha said, I am Lubna Ali. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm just kind of going to go through or like talk about this topic today. And I don't have a handout for you guys today, but I will make sure to get it to the mosque so that they can send it to you guys too, so that you have bullet points that you can refer to, because I think you'll get some good tips out of here. So relationships have the power to wound us and the power to heal us. If you are ready to develop relational self-awareness and create vibrant and loving relationships with the people who matter most to you, you've come to the right place. I'm so glad that you all are here today. It really goes to show that you want to have healthy relationships, and it starts with you. So I want to ask, how often do you take time to intentionally reflect on your relationships? Today, we're going to do a deep dive into resentment and intimate relationships. I want us today to develop a deeper understanding of what resentment exactly is and how to identify when we are experiencing it. You know, sometimes we're not always sure. We know we're having a negative feeling, but we're not sure that it's resentment necessarily. And then most importantly, I'm going to share my 9 favorite strategies for transforming resentment. So not shutting it down, not ignoring it, not invalidating our way out of it, but really truly transforming it. Okay. And I don't know if you guys notice, I have a little bit of a cold, so bear with me. I'm going to try my best. So, all right, so let's start with, what is resentment? Psychologists tend to think about resentment as a complex emotion, meaning that it is a blend of a few different emotions, so not just one, namely disappointment plus anger plus some amount of disgust. And the word resentment actually comes from the Old French ressentir, which means the re-experiencing of a strong emotion. So we just know that when we feel resentment, it's usually a very strong and intense feeling, not something you want to be carrying around with you in your relationship. So resentment has that quality of rumination, meaning we're replaying incidents over and over and over inside of our minds and kind of collecting a set of data that prove that we ought to be feeling disappointment and anger and judgment of our partner. I know I can't see you guys, but I mean, I'm curious to know, like, how many of you have felt that way. I think probably all of us have at some point. So Nelson Mandela, a famous activist from South Africa, has been quoted by saying that resentment is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies. I want you to let that sink in a little bit. In that, what Mandela is pointing us towards is the way in which resentment keeps us stuck. It's something we may feel about somebody else, but in the end, it's only doing harm to ourselves, which is why I am so glad we're spending time on this topic today, because we do not want to be living this way. All right, so resentment is sometimes referred to as the emotion of justice because it develops in the face of something that we are perceiving or experiencing as unfair. So it's kind of like a protest emotion. It's saying that this is not okay as it is. What's going on now is wrong. Resentment is actually the conceptual opposite of gratitude. And although we are not able to be grateful 100% of the time, we are all prone to slipping into the feeling of resentment at times. So it's like more of a protest emotion, like just being very upset with what's going on now and wanting it to be different for us to feel just. So an emotion of justice. All right. In an article, resentment is described as the downstream effect of more primary emotional experiences like neglect, disappointment, envy, disgust, exasperation, and irritation. So it's kind of like where we end up when there's some mix of these emotions that come together in protest of what we're experiencing. So once again, primary emotional experiences like neglect, disappointment, envy, disgust, exasperation, and irritation. Okay, so you guys understand now what resentment actually is. So now how do we identify resentment within our own selves? So let's talk about how to identify it. So take a moment to see if you can get in touch with how resentment tends to feel inside your body. You know, we can turn within our bodies to help figure out what our emotional experience is. So I want you to get in touch with how does resentment tend to feel inside your body? To me, when I call up a time when I've experienced resentment, it usually feels like a tightness in my chest. You know, you just feel tight in your chest, sort of a flush inside of my head. It feels like a warm and a bitter emotion for sure. I would love to ask you guys what it feels like for you, but like I said, I'm the one who's talking, but I really want you to think about that. Like, what does it feel like for you? Because people are going to experience it differently. So, some examples, like when asking people about what resentment feels like for them, some examples that come to mind are, like I said, tightness in my chest, in my throat, in my body. Another word to describe it is consuming. You know, it's just like all consuming, stiffness, avoiding eye contact, knots in my stomach, suppressed rage, mental knots, urgency, and that feeling of do something now. Anger, chaos, hot feelings in the face, a burning feeling, hard to find the reset button. So you see, it's a very intense emotion. All right. So I want to validate that resentment builds over time. So it might be hard for you to notice at first, and it might be true, especially if you're early in more deeply understanding yourself and your relationship experiences. You may just start to be putting words to your experiences. You know, as you're learning about how am I in a relationship? Like, how do I feel in this relationship? Some of us, especially I think in a lot of our cultures, we're not really encouraged to even think about that. And so this might be something new for you guys to reflect on. So it might be hard for you to notice at first. So I'm going to help you identify it. Okay. So resentment may be sort of building outside of your awareness. And maybe that checking in with your body is one of the best ways that you may start to identify that you're holding on to some resentment. Because our bodies, they give us so much information. It's important for us to check in with them. So you might be able to identify resentment in that way. Okay. So how about the thoughts that reflect and likely amplify the feelings of resentment? Those can sound like, I'm just going to give you some examples, and I'm curious to know, or for you guys at least, to reflect on, okay, has this ever come up in my mind when I'm feeling resentment towards my partner? So these are some examples of thoughts with resentment. So one, my partner doesn't understand how much I ... Have you ever thought about that? Two, my partner doesn't notice that I ... Three, my partner doesn't appreciate me. Four, I do so much. I try so hard. Why won't my partner ... So fill in the blank. Five, my partner should or my partner shouldn't ... And six, how many times do I have to ask my partner to fill in the blank? So I want you guys to think, have those thoughts ever come into your mind? So when you find yourself thinking some of these thoughts, you probably are, will know that, okay, I'm feeling some resentment here. So hopefully you guys are having a better understanding of what resentment thoughts would look like. So these are some of the thoughts that kind of capture and amplify and feed and fuel you through that cycle of resentment. All right, so now how about behavior? What are some of the behaviors that indicate resentment? Or some of the behaviors that indicate for you that you are in fact experiencing resentment? So to me, I would say the top behavior that highlights resentment is scorekeeping. So what I mean by this, for example, I'm loading the dishwasher for the 5th time in a row. Or I've asked my partner 5 questions and they've only asked me 2 questions. Or I've initiated sex the last bunch of times and my partner has not. Okay. So if you find yourself scorekeeping in your mind, then you know, okay, this is pretty much telling me, showing me that I am feeling some resentment. So that kind of scorekeeping, keeping score, comparing what you're doing versus to what they're doing. I know for me, I have 3 little kids. I definitely have felt this way at times with my own husband. It happens to all of us. So, all right, number 2, resentment can also show up behaviorally as sarcasm or clipped answers to questions. So, like shorter answers, and then a feeling of disengagement. So, it might not be an outright conflict that you're having, like you're not having a big argument or fight. It may just be a feeling of tension and a lack of ease. So, I want you guys to think about, okay, like, have I really felt that? And I'm sure most of us have in our relationship, whether you become a little more sarcastic. If they ask you a question, you just have more of a clipped, short answer to the question. You can feel there's some tension in the energy between the both of you. You most likely are experiencing some resentment there. All right, so I want you all to complete this sentence. I am struggling to let go of resentment about fill in the blank. So, I mean, probably some of you are here because this topic resonated with you. This is something that you really want to work on and to overcome. Because, like I said earlier, what Nelson Mandela said is like, when we are holding on to something, it's only hurting us. It's hurting us mostly in the end. So, to think of the question, I am struggling, or the sentence, fill in the blank, I am struggling to let go of resentment about fill in the blank. What is that for you? Okay. So some common examples, I'll just give you some from, my own experience with couples that I work with, clients, someone not willing to see my side of a conflict, when they're only looking at it from their perspective, not being willing to see what I see. So it could be I'm struggling to let go of resentment of my sister, not thanking me for helping so much at her wedding, my ex's lies when someone had a long affair or lied to everyone through a divorce. So these are some examples of some deep resentments that people have. And like I said, not only even with your romantic partner, also with other family members too. It can be a really heavy feeling that you're carrying around. All right. So these are really common. Inequality of the mental load and the domestic workload. That's very common, especially if you have children where you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm doing so much more than he is or she is. Somebody's inability to love me back and want me the way that I love them. Having been fat shamed by my ex and targeting my deepest insecurity. So whether it's being fat shamed or just some insecurity that you have and you feel like it's been used, um, like against you, or you're made fun of based on your insecurities, like you can carry resentment from that. These are some really hard resentments. The time that failed relationships took from my life. Some people I know, like let's say if they were in a relationship, in a marriage, and then it didn't work out in the end, they feel resentful, like, oh, that was such a waste of time for me, because they have so much resentment from that. My mother for not providing the emotional attunement I needed from her as a child. I actually see a lot with my clients. People who have struggling relationships with their mothers, especially because there's so much expectation put on a mother, that, there can be a lot of resentment that people carry throughout their adulthood. Being ignored when I speak calmly, and only giving attention when I am fuming and I'm furious. So some people can feel resentment from that. Like there can be trying to express their feelings in a healthy, calm way, but then they don't feel heard unless they're losing it and so heated and explosive. So this is just a broad list that reminds us that resentment arises in many different contexts and for many different reasons. So I really want you to think about like, how does the resentment show up in your life, whether it's with your romantic partner or with your family members, friends, it could be like that too. Okay, so our focus today is going to be on tools for transforming resentment when you want to stay in a relationship. So when you have an ongoing struggle in an ongoing relationship. So we're going to talk today about when you have resentment in a relationship, but you want to stay in the relationship. So what are tools that you can use to overcome that feeling of resentment? All right. So all of our emotions are data. Emotions point us towards something that warrants our attention. It's kind of like I kind of see it as like our feelings, our emotions, our spiritual GPS. So they're guiding us to which direction should we go in. So it's all just data and information on which direction we should go in. Something that warrants conversation with our partner. That is surely the case with resentment. When you're feeling resentment, you definitely are going to be wanting to address it, hopefully in a healthy way. Resentment lets you know that something needs to change with your perspective and or with your relationship dynamic. Resentment likely is not going to resolve on its own. Resentment is a symptom of a larger problem in the relationship. Remember, it's the emotion of justice. Resentment is something that arises inside of you. Okay, this is something that you are experiencing. Remember, it lives in you as a tightness in your chest, but it muddles the space between the two of you. So even though it's within you, it affects the space, the energy, the tension between the both of you. So it shifts the dynamic between the both of you. And it's usually, it's a negative shift in the dynamic. So that's why we are going to need our tools of relational self-awareness to address the feeling of resentment so that you can take responsibility for your experiences and approach any changes that might shift the relationship dynamic as a team. Resentment that is left unaddressed is only going to breed more resentment. That's the thing. You know what? I see a lot of couples where they have feelings of resentment towards their partner, and then they don't bring it up because maybe they don't know how to, or they fear like it's going to be a big eruption. And then what ends up happening? It just makes you more and more resentful. So that's not the answer. All right. So here's the sequence. So I'm going to just be sharing you with kind of the sequence of how resentment happens in a relationship. So you're feeling, number one, so you're feeling negatively about your partner, and you put negativity out there towards your partner. So I'm feeling something negative about my partner, and then I'm putting that negativity out there. Okay. Then your partner is going to meet and match your negativity with negativity of their own. Okay. So it's like a cycle. Like I'm mad, putting it on you. So then you get the negativity, and then you put it back on me. And their negativity towards you is going to feel to you like confirmation that your grievances are justified. Okay. Like, because then when they're being mad in return, you're going to think, see, I should be mad at them. And by the way, whether or not your grievances are justified, arguing about objective reality is a road to nowhere. So we're not talking today about whether or not your grievances are justified or not. We're talking about what you do with your grievances and how you putting the negativity out there gets you negativity in return and ends up feeling like confirmation. Okay. So it's really about, you can have your grievances, that's fine. They can be justified. It's just, how are you responding to them? How are you putting them out there? If you're putting it out there with negativity, what do you think you're going to get back? So it's really about what you're doing with the grievances. Okay. So with resentment, you want something that you are not getting. and something needs to change for you to get that relief. That something that needs to change, of course, might be the other person's behavior. But as we're going to explain today, that something that needs to shift might also be your perspective. It might also be your approach. It might also be your response to your partner. It's not easy for us to look at ourselves. It's not at all. But I will tell you, with the couples that I work with, not even only with couples, I feel like because we only have control of ourselves, it's so easy to be going and pointing the finger to somebody else, the other person. But wait, is there something that I'm doing in this dynamic too that's building that resentment, that's not working for us? We have to look at ourselves too, even if we feel like they're in the wrong. It's not easy to do that. So I am going to over and over and over, ever so gently, remind you all to keep yourself in the mix, meaning you are a part of this dynamic as well. This is not easy. And that's because when you're experiencing resentment, it really does feel so convincing that if your partner would just behave differently, you would feel better. But this chain of thought has an air of entitlement to it, like, with certainty, what is necessary and what is best, like that you feel like you know what's best. It's going to be more effective for you to begin with curiosity and compassion for why you are feeling so badly, and then move toward talking to your partner about what would feel good and what would feel supportive and nurturing to you. So when you're getting that negative feeling, instead of just being reactive to it, instead, can you get curious about it? Why am I feeling so badly about this? And let me try to bring it up to my partner so that we can handle and tackle it. And we're going to talk about that. Okay. All right. So it is time now for our 9 resentment busting strategies. I'm going to talk you through these different strategies. You can try one, you can try more than one, sort of like a trial and error, and see what's helpful for you. You can use these tools to transform resentment in your relationship. That's the goal. All right. So in some of these strategies, they're asking you to look at something inside of yourself, and you might notice that you have some resistance to that idea. Like I said, when we have to look at ourselves, it's not so easy. It's much easier to look at the other person, point the finger. We have to look at ourselves too. Okay. Because again, our default setting tends to be that we would feel that if we would feel that we would feel less resentful if our partner would just do something different. And that actually may very well be the case. However, number one, you cannot change another person. Okay, you can only change yourself. 2, sometimes the reaction that you're having to your partner's behavior is as problematic and troublesome as the thing your partner is doing. Okay, like we can get mad and say, oh, well, you made me get mad about this, or you made me explode, or you made me do this or that. That can be just as much of a problem as you didn't do the dishes. I did the dishes so many times. Okay, so we have to be willing to acknowledge that too. And then number 3, sometimes the reaction you are having is what keeps your partner stuck in what they're doing. I'm not saying that you're responsible for your partner's behavior, but what I am saying is that you are awfully powerful. What you do shapes what they do. So this is something that I talk about with couples that I see, where it's like you guys are doing a dance. So if you take one dance step, if you change your dance step, your partner is going to change the step that they make in return. So what I'm saying from this point is that what you do shapes what they do. It affects what they do. So you actually, even though you can't control their behavior, you can actually influence it. Okay. We want to influence it for the positive. So if you're going to be reacting in a negative way, you most likely are going to get that back. Okay. But instead, if you respond in a more calm way, that will influence how they come to you and respond. So I'm going to challenge you to remember that if you do something different, it's very likely that they will do something different. Okay. So this is supposed to be very empowering for you guys to know that, okay, I have some power over this dynamic. Okay, what can I do differently? I always ask my couples, like, okay, what could you have done different? Like, if we're rehashing some conflict or some fight or something in the session, I will say, okay, in the end, what could you have done differently on your end? What could you have done differently to change the result here? Okay. All right. So I'm going to challenge you to remember this. So now on to our 9 strategies. I'm going to name them up front and then give you some more information about each one of them. All right, so here they are. Number 1, identify your resentment balance. So we'll go into all of them and I'll explain them. And I'll send you guys a list of these things too with some information, okay? Take a holistic view of the relationship. That's number 2. Number 3, identify your partner's patterns of accommodation. 4, name the feeling behind the feeling. 5, revise your relationship agreements. 6, consider doing less. 7, celebrate approximations. 8, practice forgiveness. And 9, boost gratitude. Okay, so as I talk through these 9, just notice your reactions, okay? What happens inside your body as I offer them. And if and when you notice there's some rise of resistance and defensiveness to my suggestion, pause and get curious. Whenever something is going on inside your body, instead of just kind of reacting to it, can you take pause and get curious? What's going on for me? Why is this? What did this poke at me? You know? So your resistance has something to show you. It's data, it's good information. What might you be afraid of feeling? If you acknowledge that your perspective is part of the problem, do you worry then about slipping into shame, or do you worry that your partner is going to use this against you? So I want you to pay attention if there's any resistance that comes up for you or defensiveness as we go into the strategies. Remember that looking at relationship problems as dynamics helps us feel better about are better able to move out of the blame and shame and into something more curious and collaborative. That's what we want. You guys are supposed to be a team. When we're in the blame and shame, instead it becomes opponents. So we want to get curious and collaborative. And when you see it as a dynamic, like it takes 2 people, it gives you more of that. It allows you to feel that more. So your defensiveness and resistance to the ideas that I'm presenting here might also reflect that you're dealing with a significant and persistent imbalance in your relationship. If your partner blames you for all the problems in your relationship, if your partner refuses to lift a finger around the house, if your partner behaves in ways that are disrespectful and unkind, your resentment is in fact a blinking and self-protective indicator light that the status quo in your relationship is not tenable, meaning that it's not able to be maintained. It is a warning sign inside of you that it is not a good relationship for you. So you might need professional help from a therapist. So this is like just if it's so bad, like you might need professional help from a therapist. You might need to consider whether this relationship is viable. Is this something that I really want to be in? This content should not ever make you feel like you're in a relationship that is deeply unfair and erodes your sense of self-worth. So that's when you feel like, okay, you know what, this is really extreme here. So I want to just make some space for that. And as always the case, I want to give you a ton of permission to take what is helpful here and leave the rest. You don't have to listen to everything that I'm saying. See what would work for you. That's the whole point, is just to give you guys suggestions and tools and see what works for you and what doesn't. Some amount of resistance can be a sign that I'm challenging your way of seeing things. It's not always easy to do that. Or asking you to take accountability that makes you feel uncomfortable. But it may also be that this content does not apply to your situation. Like I said earlier, there are some instances where it's just It's just not a healthy relationship. And that's when you need to seek more help, because there are actually pretty gross injustices in your relationship. So I want to make space for that and name that. All right, so let's get into it. So, strategy number 1, identify your resentment balance. So, what this means, it's the idea that based on your experience in your past, especially in your family of origin, you come into your romantic relationship with a particular set of sensitivities. So, you're primed to notice particular types or textures or tones of imbalances in your dynamic. It's not about objective, capital T, truth necessarily. It's about how you are primed. So this is based on your family of origin. Okay, so when you grew up with your parents and your siblings and all of that. So when we are talking about patterns that come with us from our past, I find it helpful to talk about the role that you played in your family of origin. So we take on roles in our families. The more a family system struggles with dysfunction and unhealthy patterns, the more rigidly and narrowly that family will cast young people into roles. So I'll give examples, okay? So kids can take on roles in families of origin in order to help that family to find some approximation of stability and normalcy. Okay, so I want you guys to think about, like, what was my role? I'm going to go over a few of them. What was my role in my family of origin? Okay, so there's usually 6 typical roles. So number 1 is the perfect one. Number 2, the easy one. 3, the struggling one. 4, the peacemaker. 5, the parentified child. And 6, the rebel. So think about what your family of origin role was, because it has an impact on what your resentment balance might be. So bringing it back to the resentment balance. So if you were in a particular role, you might be particularly sensitive to imbalances in these areas because you carry with you into your adult and intimate relationships tendencies and patterns and sensitivities from the family that you grew up in. Okay, so you're going to be more sensitive depending on what your role was in your family of origin. You're going to be more sensitive to certain injustices or imbalances in your relationship now. In other words, you might be primed to feel especially sensitive to one type of imbalance based on the role you played while you were growing up. Okay, I mean, growing up, our childhood does have an impact on how we are as adults and what triggers we have in our relationship. So it's really important for you to get to know that part about yourself too. All right, so number 1, so we'll go over the different roles and I'll help you identify what your resentment balance might be. Okay, so the first one was the perfect one. So you were a perfect one in your family of origin if you felt like the grown-ups relied on your grades or your athletic accomplishments to feel good about themselves. That was the role that you played to help them feel good about themselves and on how they were raising you. So you were the perfect one. You kind of made them shine in a way. I know in our culture, I mean, I'm Indian. It's where, yeah, parents really see the kids as reflections of themselves. They put a lot on the children sometimes. There's usually that perfect or the golden child. That's kind of what that one is referring to. So if that's the case for you, your resentment balance might sound like this. I resent that I am punished for my competence. So what I'm able to do, all that I can do. I can carry more weight. So I end up carrying more. Other people are graded on a curve. There's not as much expected of them, but not me. I'm expected to take on more of a load. So if you were the perfect one growing up, you might find yourself as your resentment balance is feeling like this. It might sound like this. All right, number 2, so role in the family of origin, the easy one. So you were an easy one in your family of origin if you felt like you needed to be quiet about your wants, needs, and struggles in order to keep the family peace and to not overburden people. You became easy as a way of not rocking the boat. So there's usually that easy child. I know when I talk with families or couples, they have multiple kids. There's one that they don't really pay that much attention to because they feel like, oh, they're doing fine. So that's the person who would be the easy one. So then your resentment balance, if you were the easy one, might sound like this. I resent that the things that I do go unnoticed. People don't ask, they just assume that I can and that I will. So they don't really check in, you know? So, like, if you feel like your partner is doing that and you were the easy one, then that's what your resentment balance might sound like. So people don't ask and they just assume that I can do more and that I will. All right. So, number 3, the struggling one in your family. You were the struggling one if you tended to act up or take up a lot of space in order to keep the big people, so the adults, from fighting with each other or having problems with each other. You kind of took the heat in your family system. So this is kind of known as like the scapegoat too in the family. So someone who's the struggling one, it takes away the conflict. Like there could be tension between the parents, but then because there's the struggling child, it takes all of that negative energy and puts it on the struggling child. Okay. So you take the heat in your family. So your resentment, if you're the struggling one, your resentment balance might sound like this. I resent that things tend to be harder for me and people don't take that into account. People expect me to handle more than I can actually handle. Okay. So it's where the person who's the struggling one, they just can't handle as much as people might put on them. All right. So number 4, the peacemaker in the family. You were the peacemaker in your family of origin if the big people, the adults in your family, relied on you to broker the peace or calm things down. I know for me, I'm a middle child of 5, so I definitely was a peacemaker, which is hence why I probably am a therapist. So anyway, so that was my family of origin role, I know. All right, so your resentment, if you're the peacemaker, your resentment balance might sound like this. I resent that people expect me to initiate repair and they rely on me to clean up their messes. Okay. So it's like sometimes there's always that one person, like if there's conflict, one person is going to always be the one to initiate, like, okay, do you want to talk about things? Or, you know, it's always on that one person. So that's what your resentment balance might sound like if you are the peacemaker. All right. So number 5, the parentified child. So in your family of origin, you were a parentified child if you felt like you needed to provide comfort and validation to the grown-ups in your family, often to your own detriment. Okay. So this is where it's like the child becomes the parent in a way, because the parent doesn't have the emotional intelligence or the ability to be in control and, you know what to do. So they rely on the child. I see this a lot too. They rely on the child for that emotional support, which is a lot to put on a young child because they have their own emotional needs. All right. So your resentment, if you are the parentified child, your resentment balance might sound like this. I resent that people don't notice my struggle. I'm expected to provide comfort, but I rarely receive it. So with the parentified child, a lot of times it's where the parents or they turn to the child for that comfort without meeting the child's needs, their own emotional needs. So, all right, number 6, the rebel. You were the rebel in your family system if you had to repeatedly and consistently point out problems in your family because nobody else would speak up. So it's kind of like where you're seeing there's things that are going on, but nobody's saying anything about it. They're just brushing it under the rug. I know in our culture that does happen a lot, right? Where they don't really want to talk about negative things. It's easier if you just brush it under. So the rebel is someone who does not do that. They are the only ones who speak up. So then your resentment balance might sound like this. I resent that I'm the one who has to always call out the problems. I resent that people act like everything goes okay when they clearly are not. So that's what your resentment balance might sound like. So if you have now identified what your resentment balance is, so what I mean by that is like to know, what am I sensitive to? What am I primed because of my family of origin role? What am I primed to be more sensitive about in my relationship? So that you know that you're primed to feel activated around one type of inequality in your relationship versus another. And knowing this can help you separate the past from the present a little bit. So, like, if you're aware, okay, this is my own stuff that's coming up, then maybe what I'm seeing is not as bad as I think. It can put things in perspective a little bit when we know what of our own stuff is coming up in the relationship. So, yes, there may very well be an imbalance, but it might not be as severe or as extreme as it feels inside of you, because little you, like little your younger self is screaming, here we go again. Knowing your resentment balance gives you the chance to tend to little you. Like if little Lubna is coming up, then I know, okay, like let me tend to her. This is the chance that I can get to know that part of me and turn within me to check in what's going on. It's to assure little you that you are not going to get lost or overlooked or overburdened today like you did back then. We have to know that we have to talk to ourselves that way too. So there's a lot of inner healing too that can come up with this. That's why it's good to be curious when these things come up. Resistance, resentment comes up, defensiveness. Get curious, what's going on for me? What is this hitting inside of me? And it's just giving you more information of what needs healing inside of you. And we can give that to ourselves too. We can't always expect our partners to do that for us. So you can, in fact, now stand up for yourself, advocate for yourself, that you have resources and tools now that you didn't have back then. When you were a child, you don't have as many resources or tools. And by taking responsibility for your tendency to react strongly in this particular area, you can move yourself towards a reaction that fits the situation and helps you advocate for yourself while also advocating for the relationship. So that's why it's so important to know what your resentment balance is, because it's some of our own stuff that comes up. It's just more reflective for us. And it's not so much always on our partner solely, because then that will help you respond to your partner differently rather than dumping all of your stuff on them. All right. So strategy number 2, take a holistic view of the relationship. So a holistic view. Let's look at the bigger picture here. Can you accept that you, like all of us, are more likely to notice the domains of the relationship of which you are over functioning or giving more than your partner, and that you're less likely to notice the domain of your relationship in which you are under functioning and doing less than your partner? Can you humble yourself to know that you're going to notice more when you're doing more as opposed to when they're doing more? That you, like all of us, are at risk to not having quite an objective perspective here. Okay. Research shows you're going to notice more what you're doing as opposed to what they're doing. All right. In other words, you definitely might initiate repair far more often than your partner does because it's a strength of yours. But your partner may initiate plans with friends and family far more often than you do because that's a strength of theirs. So relationships have an inherent division of labor. And that actually is a really, really good thing. Okay. So, like, even though you might think, oh my gosh, I'm doing so much for the kids, I'm doing so much, in this area, and my partner isn't doing anything or isn't doing much. Maybe your partner's doing a lot with the finances. Maybe your partner's doing a lot with the home repair or, things like that. Like that, we have to be able to look at that, because it makes a big difference. So you want to take a holistic view of the relationship. You're not just wanting to look from your own lens, because then you're just not looking as clearly. All right. So I think this is a place where love languages can be very helpful. So a lot of you hopefully have heard of the 5 love languages. If you haven't, I really encourage you to look into it. It's a book by Dr. Gary Chapman. So he argues that there are 5 love languages. So these are ways in which we like to show love, we like to receive love. So the 5 love languages are words of affirmation, acts of service, quality time, gifts, and physical touch. So you are likely over functioning in your relationship in your preferred love language. So, for example, if your primary love language is acts of service, you probably take excellent care of your partner when they're sick. You might feel resentful that they don't take very good care of you when you are sick. Okay. But now take a moment and think about your partner's love language. Let's say their love language is quality time. They're making sure you two go on a date or you check out this new exhibit or a museum that you wouldn't even think of doing. So be careful not to make a hierarchy on better or worse ways of contributing to the relationship. That can get you in trouble. Instead, just notice that you are contributing in different ways. Don't just look at your own domain, because when you do, you get skewed. So noticing and coding is a powerful way to neutralize and transform resentment. Ask yourself the following questions. 1, what is my partner doing for me that I am missing because it is not in the domain that I am because it is not in the domain that I am not tending to. So what are they doing for me that I'm missing? Okay, that's going to help you kind of lessen your resentment a little bit, because you're seeing, oh, wait, there's stuff in this area that I don't really do. Okay, feels a little more balanced. 2, what keeps me from noticing and coding these actions that are helpful to our overall relationship? Why is it hard for me to see them? 3, what might I worry that I will lose if I start to count their contributions more? What do I fear I will lose if I see, oh, wait, it's not as imbalanced as I thought. It's just I wasn't noticing this area or their domains that they do a lot in. Number 4, in order to shift the overall dynamic in our relationship, how might I challenge myself to perhaps express a bit more love in my partner's love language? So when it comes to love languages, like usually we have a way where we love to receive love. We prefer that. But with our partner, we have to know what's their love language. Like, can we show it in their way? That's how they're going to feel most loved, not just the way that we like to feel loved. Okay. So in order to shift the overall dynamic in your relationship, how might you challenge yourself to perhaps express a bit more love in their love language? Don't just think about, oh, well, this is how I like to receive love. So I love gifts. So let me give gifts. Maybe your partner doesn't care about gifts. Maybe they want quality time or words of affirmation. Can you challenge yourself to give in their love language? That's how they're going to feel most loved, not just in your own way of looking at it. Okay. So taking a holistic view of your relationship, so looking at the wider lens, is a way of widening your lens and ensuring that you are taking into account all that your partner does. There's a ton of humility and respect in reminding yourself that you are having a skew in your perspective, because we are all at risk of having a skew in our perspective. And you know why? It's because we're so used to just looking through our own lens. But if you do that, if you're in a relationship and that's all you're doing, it's not going to help you. It's not going to help you become a team. Okay. So it takes a lot of humility and respect to remember for your own self, wait, maybe my perspective is skewed. So this might be bringing up some resistance for you guys if it's hard to look at yourself too. Okay. And what matters is not the presence of the skew, but what you do about it. And widening that lens is a powerful tool for transforming the resentment. All right. So number 3, the third resentment busting strategy is identify your partner's patterns of accommodation. So the heart of a healthy, intimate relationship is interdependence, meaning two people becoming a we. Okay. That's not dependence. It's not codependence. It's interdependence. And there are things that you do to accommodate your partner for sure. Okay, so identify your partner's patterns of accommodation. All right, and your resentment might be coming from the things that you are aware of that you are doing things to accommodate your partner, and your accommodation of them creates feelings inside of you: fear of losing yourself, fear that this means you are needy or weak, etc. And all of that focus on how you are accommodating them might lead you to miss the ways that they are accommodating you. Okay, so learning to notice your partner's pattern of accommodation can help you transform your feelings of resentment. So ask yourself the following questions. 1, what are ways in which I might not be particularly easy to get along with, at least some of the time? None of us are perfect. We all are going to be annoying sometimes or do things that are, not the best. All right. So, when does my partner look the other way? So, what does my partner tend to look the other way on? What do you do that might be annoying, difficult, burdensome, etc.? And can you feel appreciation for their accommodations? Maybe they don't make a big deal out of it. Maybe they just say, oh, well, that's a quirk of hers or his. I'll just let it be. You can notice and show appreciation for what your partner does to make up for your imperfections, your growing edges, for your perfectly imperfect humanness. This acknowledgement goes a long way towards building safety and closeness. Okay, so we want to be able to identify, like, when are they accommodating us? Yeah, I'm accommodating them, but let me widen my lens a little bit. When are they accommodating me? Because I know I'm not perfect. Okay, so that can help kind of soften the resentment too. All right, so strategy number 4. Name the feeling behind the feeling. This is like couples therapy 101 here, okay? In couples therapy, we talk about hard disclosures versus soft disclosures. Hard disclosures are expressions of anger, contempt, frustration, and of course, resentment. For example, you never ask me about my day. Hard disclosures reflect urgency, frustration, and pain. It's not about whether or not the feeling is legit, it's about the how. Okay, so when we do a hard disclosure, that's like when you really are just attacking, like, you never do this, you never. I see that with couples all the time. It's just, you know what you're going to get with a hard disclosure, what you're going to get back. Okay, so when we do a hard disclosure, your partner is going to become defensive and shut down because they feel attacked. Okay, that's not going to, I don't know if maybe you guys listened in a couple years ago. I did tips on how happy couples handle conflict effectively. This is one of them, is how are you even starting the conversation? Okay, so when you do a hard disclosure, they're going to get defensive, they're going to shut down, they'll complain about how you're difficult. This leads to your concern going unaddressed because it's just seen as an attack. So it's not even going to be working in your favor to be coming off with a hard disclosure. By contrast, if you can be brave enough to do a soft disclosure, it's going to go differently. So a soft disclosure is verbalizing the tender feelings that are hanging out behind the anger, behind the contempt, behind the resentment. For example, I feel lonely. I feel exhausted. I feel invisible. I feel like I spend all of my time taking care of everybody else and no one is taking care of me. Imagine if you share these vulnerable feelings with your partner, how are they going to respond? So this soft disclosure is not a guarantee, but it has a much better chance of endearing your partner to you, of drawing them closer to you, of invoking feelings of empathy in your partner than if you used a hard disclosure. Okay, so this is why it's so important to get into the habit of naming the feeling behind the feeling. It's like if you feel anger, anger is a secondary feeling. You always feel something first. So if you can go to the underlying feeling and express those more vulnerable feelings, you're going to get a very different response. Okay. That way you are acknowledging for yourself that your resentment is a cover for, or is sitting alongside those tender, more vulnerable feelings of loneliness or invisibility and creating more connection, or by challenging yourself to put that into voice. You're inviting a different kind of response from your partner. And this is something that is in your control, something that you can present the feeling in a different way, and that most likely is going to get you a different result. Okay. So when you get a different kind of a response from your partner, your feelings of resentment are going to soften and shift, because you know what? They're going to feel more empathic towards you. So this can really help, bust some of the resentment. You want your approach to be where you approach resentment like a team. So I want you and your partner to be shoulder to shoulder, looking together at the resentment. Okay, you can invite this kind of collaboration by saying something to your partner like, I'm aware that I'm feeling some resentment towards you that I don't actually want to feel. I want to focus on what's going well, but I'm trying to figure out why my attention keeps getting stuck here. Okay, so it's where you guys are a team and the resentment is on the outside and you're tackling the resentment. You're not tackling each other. Okay, so this framing moves you out of blame, out of finger pointing and the sort of the victim stance, and this idea that you are doing this to me, and it moves the two of you in something more curious and collaborative. And this framing is going to also reduce your partner's defensiveness because you're enlisting them as a helper, as an ally, like, help me. Help me. I don't want to be feeling this way. So help me, like, let's tackle this together. It becomes the two of you against the resentment, against the problem, rather than the two of you against each other. Okay. All right. All right. So strategy number 5, revise your relationship agreements. So it is known that when we feel resentful, we get seduced into a false idea that if our partner would just do more, we would feel less resentful. And when resentment is taken root, our partner is doing more actually won't end up making a difference. That once they begin doing more dishes, the focus of our resentment will simply shift to something else that they're not doing. Okay. And that's because the root of feeling resentment toward our partner is actually negative feelings we have about ourselves. In other words, we feel resentful about our partner's behavior because we think that their behavior makes us feel something negative about us, that they are not caring for us because perhaps we're not worthy of care. So then we have to become self-compassionate in order to address that root source. So I think this is a valid perspective. You can and should see if there are tweaks in your relationship agreements, okay? See if these tweaks can make a difference in your feelings of resentment. If you're feeling resentful towards your partner, check in with yourself. Can you ask for something specific that you suspect would make a difference? Can you be clear with your partner about how and when you would like to have that done? Can you also personalize your request by saying out loud to your partner what it would mean to you if they could do it? So there's that vulnerable piece, okay? You're not just saying, oh, well, you don't do the dishes. No, you're being more specific. It's not just asking for that thing that you need. It's also adding that vulnerable piece that personalizes the request. It says, here's why it matters to me. Here's how I suspect I would feel if you were willing to be more consistent in this area. Maybe I would feel seen. I would feel heard. So if you can do that, you can make your request and they agree. And if they agree, then check in after a week or so and see how the revised relationship agreement is going. I know sometimes I do this with my husband where, because we have 3 little kids, and sometimes I feel like, okay, I'm doing too much. Like if I'm getting short with them, I know, wait, maybe there's too much on my plate here. And then I'll talk with him about, okay, like, I think let's divide some labor here a little bit more because I'm feeling like it's being too much on me, right? So then maybe he'll cook for them a couple days, or so it's like it's really important to do that. That can help, and hopefully if they agree, then you can see, okay, how is this change in our system working? Okay, so what might be it may be the case that what's needed is just a change, creating more justice and more clarity. So this is something that is worth trying. I want you to be specific though, and tie it to what it would mean to you. And I want you to be really clear in what the ask is. Don't just say, oh, can you do the dishes more? Or, oh, can you take care of them more? No, like be specific. How often and what way? What does doing it look like, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the thing. That's a challenge. Be specific, because then it's going to be easier and more clear for them to understand. All right. If your partner meets your request by, well, you don't do this, or, just in retaliation, you can validate that. You can say, you know what? Okay, that's fine. I'm happy to talk to you about what I'm not doing in a separate conversation. Okay. But when you raise a concern, the focus of that conversation needs to be your concern. So there's space for them to talk too. It's just, let's focus on one, and we can have another time to talk about your concerns. So you don't have to be the only one who brings up concerns. No, they're going to have concerns too. It just needs to be framed at a different time, in a different place, for you to be addressing their concern or their need. All right, so strategy number 6. I know there's a lot. It's a lot of information. So strategy number 6, consider doing less. So this one is a tricky one, okay? You can ask your partner to do more, and that might be the ticket forward, but hold open the possibility that freedom from resentment that might come from you, it might come from you doing less. Okay, maybe you're putting more on your plate than you have to. Again, nothing here is meant to justify or excuse gross imbalances in effort. When I'm addressing imbalances, we have to explore the idea of partner A doing less. Certainly, we can talk about partner B doing more, but we also need to look at partner A doing less. Do you have to be doing everything that you're doing? If you're so exhausted, do you have to be doing all those things? If nobody's asking you to do it, okay? So in partner A's resistance to the idea of them doing less is sometimes because they think what they're doing is nice, thoughtful, or loving. But it's actually not loving when you give so much of yourself that you end up expecting a lot in return. Like, that's not loving. It sets you up to feel like you need a lot of praise, reciprocation in order to feel good about what you've done. It's actually kind of controlling, okay? You are attempting to ensure that your partner treats you in a particular way, okay, when you are treating them in a particular way. And because you're doing a nice thing for them, you keep yourself beyond reproach. So when your partner brings this up with you and say, well, what I'm doing is nice. After all I've done for you, you should appreciate what I'm doing. But maybe they don't want that, or they didn't ask for that, So the bottom line here is that if you give beyond what you can give with an open heart, you are actually doing relational damage. Okay, let that sink in a little bit. For example, birthday preparations. Let's say for your birthday, your partner gets you a card and a gift. But when it's their birthday, you pull out all the stops. You have a bunch of events, you throw a big party, so many people. And this imbalance leaves you understandably resentful of the efforts that you are making compared to the efforts that they're making. Okay, it's really hard for you to consider doing less, because how can someone argue with giving? Like, oh, I'm just being nice. But you know what? No, you're being nice, but you're expecting something in return. And that does relational damage. Also, it's important to know that gift giving is something very culturally bound, depending on how your family of origin was. There might be a difference in even how you guys celebrate and how you give gifts, all of that. So even though you may feel justified in the loving nature of what you do, it does not mean it is fair to expect your partner to do the same. Okay, so look for ways in your relationship that you might be at risk for turning a difference into a hierarchy. Your way versus your partner's way becomes your way is better than your partner's way. And you may need to grieve that you are not going to have the kinds of celebrations you had growing up. And in that grief, you can step into acceptance, and you can begin the practice of doing less in order to stave off resentment. Okay, because they're going to be a different person. They're going to see things differently. All right. And also, the other point I want to make here is that there can be gender inequalities that might be at play here. For example, your male partner may have grown up in a home where his mom took charge of the celebrations and therefore carries that expectation into his own relationship. He carries the assumption that this is not his domain. So if you have a conversation about it, it can help you. But like I said, it has to be communication, conversation, that soft disclosure too, okay? And if there isn't a change here, you're going to end up resentful. Like if you just can't, if you don't change, you keep on doing everything that you're doing because you think it's good or nice, but they don't do the same, that's not going to help. In fact, you both are going to end up resentful. You will resent all that you do relative to your partner, and your partner will resent the way that you exhaust yourself and that you expect him to be appreciative of your efforts, even though he has not asked you to go to such extremes. Okay. So you can, of course, make a personalized request of what you would like from your partner, but hold space for 3 other paths. All right. So the first path is if your partner began to express more appreciation for all that you do, would that help you feel less resentful? Feeling seen may be as important. Like maybe you just want appreciation. You don't need them to do the same thing. All right. Number 2, could you grieve the loss of what you wish you could have to protect yourself from feeling disappointment? If you choose this path, make sure you're letting yourself feel proud that you are making this shift for the benefit of the relationship. You know, so yeah, you just grieve the loss, like, oh, it's not going to be the same, but you know what, that's okay because I don't want to live with this resentment, and I'm proud of myself for accepting that fact. Okay, number 3, could you give yourself the kind of attention that you're craving from your partner? So often we long for something from the outside, but we can turn some of that within and remember that our partner cannot and will not be everything for us. You know, maybe you can do a big thing for your birthday if you like all of that stuff, you know? This idea of doing less is a tricky one, and it can make a big difference though. It comes down to something different and giving up some control, which is not easy. Remember, when we feel uncomfortable, that's when we're growing because we're doing something different. All right, strategy number 7, celebrate approximation. So let's say you've been feeling resentment and you've expressed it to your partner, and now your partner is making an effort, but their effort is clunky. It's not as smooth as it is when you do the same for them. Okay. See if you can allow yourself to celebrate the approximation. Grade your partner on a curve. They're not you, and they do not have to be you. Okay. See if you can focus on the effort they are making and not the ways in which this is not an A+ performance. Okay. They don't have to be perfect. A lot of times it's the effort, and that goes a long way. We don't want to, underestimate the effects that the effort can have and making us feel appreciative. So far from being patronizing, your willingness to notice and celebrate their approximation is in fact motivating for them. What we focus on, we get more of. So what you put attention on, if you put attention on, oh, they did the dishes. Maybe the dishes were not as clean. Maybe it wasn't put in the dishwasher the exact same way you do. But you know what? They did them. And I appreciate that. And it's better for me, it's healthier for me to focus on the fact that they did them rather than, oh, harping on, oh, look, they're still so dirty, you know? Dishwasher is a big one, okay? I see. Okay. All right. We have to remember that the first time a couple tries a new behavior, it's going to be clunky. The clunkiness is in the beginning is just reflects the place from which we're starting, okay? Not the actual quality of what they're doing, okay? Like nobody's going to be perfect if they just make a change right away, you know? I want to be clear here that celebrating an approximation is different from enabling weaponized incompetence. So what that means is when somebody pretends incompetence in order to get out of doing it. So just make sure it's a passive aggressive behavior for sure. Something that has been talked about, especially in gender inequalities, such as husbands or dads underperforming in the hopes of mama or, oh, the wife saying, forget it, I'll just do it myself, okay? So people of any gender, of course, can be guilty of weaponizing incompetence. The difference between your partner trying but being clunky and then weaponizing incompetence comes down to a felt sense that you have. So once again, check in with yourself. How am I feeling? Okay, do I feel like there's a genuine effort here? They're really trying to meet my feelings or, empathize with me here and meet my needs. So you can check if you feel that way. If you feel a sense that they are using weaponized incompetence, because it does happen, check in with yourself And the more grounded that you can feel in your ask, the easier it will be for you to suss out what's really going on in their behavior. And finally, remember that patience is not foolishness, okay? Changing patterns takes time, it takes practice, it takes repetition. Change happens in little moments, okay? So affirm yourself that it's okay for you to be asking, to be patient, and tell your partner that it's okay to be trying and to be imperfect. Okay, all right, we have 2 more. Okay, number 8, strategy number 8, practice forgiveness. Resentment is a cue that you are struggling with a lack of forgiveness. You're not able to move into a space of forgiveness. And one thing we know for sure is that if you're going to be in an intimate relationship, you're going to need to learn how to put the past in the past for your sake and for your partner's sake. I know forgiveness is a whole other topic, okay? So, my favorite definition of forgiveness is letting go of the wish that the past could be different. It's such a big one. Yeah. What happened, happened. Even though we don't like it, even though we wished it hadn't, even though we wish we could give anything to change it back, to take it back. Forgiveness is not easy. It requires time, intention, and practice. And it's a relational process, okay? Your partner needs to do their part by demonstrating to you a willingness to be accountable, to be open-hearted, and to validate your struggle. And their efforts are essential to helping you do your part, which is bit by bit, step by step, putting down the heavy chains of resentment. Okay, it's important for us to remember that good people will do good things because they're good people. Also, good people will do bad things because they're human. Okay, nobody's going to be perfect here. And the penalty of not being able to love imperfect people is condemning oneself to loneliness. Forgiveness is such a big topic. Know that for now, it is incredibly brave to put the past in the past bit by bit. It's incredibly brave to cancel that debt, which is what forgiveness is. It's a canceled debt. You could continue to demand retribution. You could continue to remind your partner of that painful thing they did. But forgiveness says, I release. I let go of the opportunity to punish you again and again for what happened, for my sake, for your sake, and for our sake. Okay. So that's going to be really, really important. I know it's very hard for some of us to forgive. And like I said, this is not only in romantic relationships, it's also with other people too in our lives. All right. Okay. So number 9, the last one, we're there. Okay. Boost gratitude. All right. It's important to know that resentment is the conceptual opposite of gratitude. I mentioned this earlier in the seminar. So it makes sense that boosting your gratitude practices will crowd out the feelings of resentment. Gratitude offers a pathway out of resentment. So, what kinds of gratitude practices might you integrate into your life? So, here are some suggestions. Okay. Number 1, express gratitude directly to your partner over and over and over. The effects of expressing gratitude benefit you as well. Research shows that partners are more willing to meet their partner's requests when they're on the receiving end of gratitude from their partner. So in other words, gratitude begets responsiveness. So we both win. All right. So express gratitude directly. At the end of my couple sessions, I always have the couples share an affirmation of like something that they appreciate about their partner over the past week. And then I make them make sure they say it directly to them. So not like, oh, you know, so-and-so took care of the kids. No, like tell him, tell her. Okay. So you want to express gratitude directly to your partner. All right. Number 2, create a gratitude album on your phone. This could be fun. Make a folder on your phone of sweet pictures of you and your partner, screenshots of loving text exchanges, quotes about love that help you feel warmly and positive about the relationship. If you have it there on your phone, you can request or reference it often, you know, so it's always good because even though they can be annoying sometimes, when we come back to this, when we look at the positive things, it's like, okay, wait a minute, they're not all bad. Okay, it's not the end of the world. All right. Number 3, before bed, reflect on 3 things that you're grateful for from the day. So these can be small, simple things like a delicious dinner, receiving a funny text from an old friend. You can write these in a journal or use an app on your phone to just go through the ritual of just writing it down so that you can have a place to turn to look at it and to see it. So like just so many things to be grateful for, because when we have so much attention on the resentment, if we have a place, wait, there's so many positive things here. It just puts things in perspective once again, right? So you can supercharge, number 4, you can supercharge this practice by talking briefly with your partner at the end of the day about 3 things that you're grateful for. So this can be 2 to 3 minutes tops. It doesn't have to be long, but just make sure that you guys clarify your expectations for this conversation. Okay. So you can share three gratitudes. So just to be specific, right? So you can say, we'll share 1 relational gratitude and 2 miscellaneous ones. Okay. So that you don't leave space to compare which one of you talked more than the other one about which one of you is more grateful of the relationship. No. Okay. So that could really be nice. I often encourage couples to have check-ins too at night. I mean, at night or whenever they can, just to check in and make sure that you're connecting, like it could be a few minutes. So like if you're connecting over things you're grateful for, that's really a positive way to check in. All right. So this last one, boosting gratitude, is another way of moving out of resentment or softening the negative feelings. Okay. All right. So that's it. We made it. I know it's a lot of information. I'm going to try to send it to you guys soon so that you can have this to reference. There's so many things. Like I said, you can try 1, you can try 2, whichever ones, whatever is helpful to you, take it. If it's not, you can leave the rest. These are just to give you ideas. And you just see how living with this negative energy, this resentment, it only pushes you more apart. There are actual tools that you can use to bring you closer together. So that's what I have for you guys now. I know we just have a few minutes.
Thank you, Lubna. I really appreciate it. There are not a lot of questions there. I see Chili's just attesting to the fact that the effectiveness of number 6 and 7, once I applied them, they make a great difference in my life.
Oh, that's
So,
wonderful.
so there's so much. I think one is insight. If we have insight, we can kind of work so far on. And I would appreciate these slides because this would
Yes.
be very helpful.
For sure. Just some things
Sure.
that you guys can turn to, to just remind yourselves like, okay, there's a way out of this. And it's things that I can do on my end. I don't have to depend on somebody else to help me let go of the resentment.
Yeah. And really figuring out the different strengths we have as a couple, right? I kind of have to remind myself when you were kind of saying this example about being sick and saying, I care for you so much, but when I'm sick, you don't. I think that scale of comparative scale needs to go away constantly because we are different in our different strengths and weaknesses.
Right. The scorekeeping, like in the hierarchy, those are, you just know when you're starting to do that, that means that there's some resentment there. So you can really identify that that's what's going on.
Yeah. No, thank you. Really appreciate it. Let me see if there's another.
Yeah, of course. Of
Yeah,
course. So
somebody else said, this is so helpful. Thank you. I think what you said about forgiveness debt is so important, but it feels so hard to let go of.
I know it's so hard. And that's why I'm saying, like, with some of these things, like, if you guys feel like, like you see the value in some of these tools, but you just think, oh, but it's so hard for me to do it, you can always seek help. There's ways, like, sometimes we have to do our own personal work, individually. Like, you can talk to a therapist, you can, find ways to let go of some of that, because otherwise, what you're bringing all of that into the relationship. So I get it. I'm there with you. It's hard to forgive. It's hard to let go. It's hard to not keep score, all of that. If you find yourself struggling with that, like, you can always seek help too, to work on that so that you can bring a healthier, more healed partner to the relationship too.
Right. Thank you, Jazakallah. I'm going to stop the recording. Is there some? Yeah, there's another question. What is the psychological reason of why people repeat the hard times over and over again?
Yeah,
It increases resentment and hurt more, but somehow we don't want to let go.
Yeah, well, so the thing is that a big part of it is it's probably hitting something from our past too, And when we focus on the negative, like human beings, more likely, we do tend to remember negative things more than positive things. And so when you are more, you have maybe more of that negative way of thinking, like your, whether it's anxiety or just your negative way of thinking, it like latches onto something. And so it just repeats it over and over. It has this ruminating nature to it. So that's where you have to know, wait a minute, can you even be aware that that's what your mind is doing? I'm just focusing on the negative here. Okay, if I'm focusing so much on the negative, we can redirect our attention. What do you want to put your attention on? What are they doing? And that's why I'm saying, like, in one of the strategies, it was like make a folder on your phone of positive things, or write in a journal of your things you're grateful for, because then it is a place to go to, an actual place to go to challenge that tendency, that natural tendency to ruminate on the negative. Okay, so I think like it probably, maybe somebody hurt you when you were like, it also can come back down to your younger self too, you know? So there's so many different reasons as to why, but I would say those are kind of some main ones, like just general ones. So, but that's why it's good to have like, wait, let me look at these positive things. Okay, that's challenging my way of thinking right now. Even though my mind has a tendency to turn to the negative, I need to practice and be intentional about redirecting my attention to the positive. I work with so many clients, especially if you have anxiety or depression, you focus on the negative things in your life when there could be so many positive things going on, but you just overlook them. You know, like it's where, and maybe even also the way you were raised, maybe the way you're raised, maybe your parents were more negative or they were more anxious, you know? So it's like it kind of, you're conditioned to think more in that way, but you just see you could be missing out on so much positivity that's going on because you're just more wired and conditioned to think of the negative.
Thank you, Lubna. Let me see if there's one more question. Yeah, I think somebody else said, thank you very much. This was amazing. The resentment, balance, and family role part really stuck with me.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm so glad. Yeah. So I'm going to give you guys this. Hopefully I could get it to you guys within the next couple of days. I'm just a little sick, so I wasn't able to do it in time, but I will definitely, I want you to just take these things, take these tools, and just let's have as healthy lives as possible. I was talking to Afsha earlier before everyone signed on, just saying with everything that's going on overseas, like it just is reminders to us, like there's so much healing that needs to happen in the world, and it starts with you healing yourself and being as healthy as possible. Okay, so I want you guys to have all the tools that you can in order to just live as healthy lives as possible, because you know there's so much going on, and this is what we have control over.
Great. Jazakallah. Jazakallah for this. Nudrat, you had anything to add?
Not at all. Thank you so much, Jazakallah khair, for this wonderful lecture. I just had one question, rather, was that when you brought that family role part of it, it was more like, what if you resonate with more than one of them? Like, yeah, you were probably a lot of them were
Yeah,
there.
it's true. Yeah, you could be more than one. You know, you definitely could be more than one. And so, like, but if you are more than one, then you can see, okay, well, then maybe I'm sensitive to these resentment balances, you know? So, yeah, so it's not necessarily that you would only be one. You could be more than one for sure. Like, you could be the peacemaker and you could be the perfect one, you know? So, some of them do kind of go hand in hand. So, yeah, you could definitely be more than one. Yeah.
True. And then, yes, there was this part that, your past does play a role on what you are doing right now. And it's hard to let go of that to kind of, get into this. So hopefully the slides will help us practice this more and take those points for us so we can do this, because it seems like everything that was there, it was like wonderful. Like there was a lot of information, a lot of it
A lot,
kind
I
of
know.
put into practice. Each one of that was like very much to do. And it felt like each one needs like time by itself to understand and
I know.
process and go and practice. So
Right.
we would really, really appreciate your slides. I think we should come back again and kind of do like, okay, how's it, what is this doing in your lives and how it's changing. So hopefully
For
that
sure.
will help.
That would be amazing. Yeah, like for you guys. And you could even make a goal for yourselves too. Like, you know what? Okay. I know like with the new year, people sometimes have goals like, okay, what do I want to work on? What do I want to let go of, for this new year coming up? And so to even think like, you know what is a goal when it comes to resentment that I want to let go of? And can I intentionally, using these tools, can I intentionally try to make that happen? Because we can want it, everybody wants it, but are you willing to put in that work? That's the thing if you want to get the results. So I think, yeah, you could even have small goals for your own self. You know what? I want to give resentment over my tendency to score keep or to have a hierarchy or, like, and then, okay, look at these strategies and do them differently. So, and like I said, in the beginning, it's going to be clunky. It's not going to be perfect or anything, but it's the consistency. It's the, trying over and over and over again. And then hopefully it'll get easier. But remember, it's you just saving your own self. It's for your own sake to let go of some of this. It's for your sake, your partner's sake, for the both of your sake. We don't want to be living with this, walking around everywhere you go, carrying all of this resentment around. That's not a fun way to live at all.
No, absolutely. And it impacts your productivity through a day. Like we could all imagine a day which begins with an argument, or not even an argument, forget, it's just a day which began with something that was not appropriate and we couldn't get it out of our head, and then the whole day was like, I could have just functioned so much better without this thought bothering me.
Right.
So
And we can give that to ourselves. We can learn how to let go, and like we don't always need to depend on someone else to do that. We need to look at ourselves too. So, but like I said, if you have struggles with that, like you can always seek help and work on something like that. But this is constant work. It's a lot of work, which is just, is there value in doing it? Is it worth it? Are you going to invest in yourself in that way? So yeah, so I know we're out of time. I'm so glad that you guys found value in this. I will definitely get you the tips and strategies and everything, as soon as possible. And so just like I said, just keep the healing coming. That's what we need. So
Thank you. Jazakallah, Lubna. You take care. I'm gonna end.
all right.
Assalamu
So long.
alaikum.
Bye. Bye.